I want us to think again about mental health. Let's meet Alice. Alice had a relatively normal childhood. Nothing was apparent, but when she got to adolescence, she started to suffer from anxiety. And this became particularly acute as she sat her GCSEs. She really wanted to do well, and it meant a lot to her, but the pressure really got to her, and she began to experience quite severe levels of anxiety, really frightening experiences for her. Her parents didn't really understand. They hadn't had these experiences. And her school, although they talked about stress, didn't really help her understand what she was experiencing. Left alone with these really intense experiences, she really came to feel there was something wrong with her mind. She thought there was really something wrong, and this really frightened her. She kind of got over it after her GCSEs, and there was a little period of time when she was okay. But then again, when she sat her A-levels, it came back to her. But again, because she felt there was something wrong with her, she didn't really share this to any great degree with anyone else. And she endured it, but each time she had an episode, it made her feel more strongly that there really was something wrong with her. Again, after her A-level, she settled in and she had some time without anxiety, but again, it reappeared in her life when she transitioned and changed into living away from home. Again, other episodes in her work, but nobody really spoke about it. And again, because she felt there was something wrong, she didn't speak about it either. This continued in her life, times when she didn't have anxiety, but then when there was times of change and challenge, it really did reoccur in her life. She didn't talk about it, but neither did the people that she came into contact with at work or in the health service when she had her children. And again, when she retired, nobody spoke about these things. And as she got older, in actual fact, the episodes got more severe until she did seek help later in life and received some CBT therapy, which helped a little bit, but really didn't get it out of her life. The stats that, if we look at them, would really support this story. We know from our evidence that mental health is very prevalent in fact, 1 in 4 of us in the course of our life will experience a clinical mental health problem, and at any one time, 1 in 6. So there's lots of Alices out there. There'll be lots of you that'll be Alices, and we certainly know lots of Alices. Mental ill health is reoccurrent, so people have it episodically, just like Alice did. And indeed, the stats would show you that once you've suffered once, you're increased risk of suffering again. And for something like depression, once you've suffered 3 times, you're 75% more likely to have another episode. And most alarmingly, just like it was in Alice's case, mental ill health is showing up early in people's lives. And so by 24, 75% of mental ill health is already showing up in our young people's lives. When we look at this kind of evidence, a lot of us have the instinct and the reflex, and indeed this is borne out in policy, to invest more and get more mental health services. And of course, I would never argue against that. But I think we need to take a pause and think more deeply about what this thing is, what this mental health issue is for us as human beings. If we look at the treatment, we know that only 30% of people receive treatment for mental health, but yet that treatment doesn't always hit the mark. So currently, for those 30%, we're only offsetting about 13% of the burden of mental ill health. But some health economics argue that even if we covered all the clinical mental ill health there is, with the best possible treatments, we'd still only offset 40% of the burden, which means 3/5 of the burden of mental ill health aren't averted by treatment. Begins to give us an insight that maybe mental health treatment and mental health illness narrative isn't the only thing that's going to help us here. And for me, the overuse of the mental health narrative to see mental health as mental illness has some unforeseen consequences. So firstly, it's not a really hopeful narrative. So like in the case of Alice, she began to feel that there was something wrong. She blamed herself. She saw herself as having a deficit in some way. To have an ill mind is not a very hopeful story. It also, as was in Alice's case, is the case that if we think there's a deficit, we're not going to share that with other people. We fear being judged if we're open about our experience. And also, we judge ourselves, which is the high amount of shame that becomes involved in mental ill health. And thirdly, I think the consequence is that it disempowers us ordinary people. We begin to think that you need a very specialist set of technical skills to talk about mental health. So an experience that's shared by so many of us, 1 in 4, if not more, becomes an experience that we don't feel we're qualified to deal with. The overall consequence of all of that, as was shown in Alice's case, is that a mind can become isolated and disconnected. And anybody who knows anything about psychology knows that that's the very worst condition for a mind to be in. Minds were made to be connected. Minds were made to be relational. Health comes from minds relating to other minds. So the healing power is in connection, and the healing power is in community. And maybe the overuse of this medical model is working against this healing. So what do I think we can do better? Imagine how things would be if we had maybe complementary narratives about mental ill health, that we not only saw the illness, but we saw the positive aspect of mental health. So mental health is not just about having no illness. Mental health is also having something positive, mental well-being, feeling good and doing well in life. And evidence can suggest that we might get as far in creating mental health as concentrating on the positive as just concentrating on getting rid of the negative. And so we could ask different questions. We could ask questions like, rather than what's wrong with you, we could ask questions about what's happening for you, or what are you trying to achieve? Secondly, I think we can do more to build the skills and the confidence of all our helping workforce to play more of a part in promoting and preventing mental ill health. We can pull out the skills from the mental illness service, and we can give them away to our frontline staff so that they can play a role in preventing people's mental ill health. Imagine how it had been different if Alice's parents, Alice's teachers, Alice's work colleagues and managers had been able to talk and help Alice talk about mental health and offer some evidence-based suggestions. So I hope that this time will help us think differently, will help you think differently about mental health and the part you can play.